right, here we are. Ricardo, thank you so much for being here tonight. For those of you watching, Emmanuel Mercedes or Manny Mercedes, I'm a psychologist and past president of the Latino Mental Health Association of New Jersey. I'm here tonight with my brother, Ricardo Martinez. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Ricardo Martinez, a fellow psychologist, also lifetime member and past president of the Latino Mental Health Association of New Jersey, and really happy to be here to talk about this important topic that you and I have been flirting about, talking about in different venues and the importance of it.
So for those wondering what you're about to see, Ricardo and I and a few other people, we've been talking about the possibility of putting either a podcast or some kind of platform in which we're able to have a discussion about what it's like to be a Latino man, the challenges that we face, some of the questions that come up as we're trying to address Latino man mental health, some of the layers and complexity that we experience ourselves as being Latino man, that other people who may not be Latino but can relate to the experience. We've been wanting to have this conversation for a minute. So what you're about to participate or be part of tonight is, being a witness to Ricardo and I, who are going to be speaking from a perspective of being both mental health professionals, Latino brothers and fathers. We are sharing a lot tonight, and this is probably going to be about 30 minutes or so. We want you, as you're watching, if anything comes up for you, please comment. Please feel free to contact us, whatever you feel is necessary to be part of this conversation. We're hoping that this is going to be the first of a series to follow, and we are also hoping that we're going to have other people involved. Maybe the next one, Ricardo, that we have, we'll probably have one that is in person and that we get to enjoy some libations.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely. So why don't you kick it off right before we logged in? You brought up the point. Why are you here tonight?
I think, why I'm here and why this topic seems to be I'm very passionate about this topic. I've caught the ear of several people who also feel passionate about, also saw the thread, is that I think that there's a bit of a crisis among men. I'm not alone in that thought. The statistics bear out that men are not doing well as a group. Suicide rate is 3 or 4 times that of women. College readiness, college acceptance, and college completion is much lower than it is for women. Working at the VA with predominantly men, either at the VA or in a forensic setting, I started to see commonalities among many men of feeling disaffected, lost, and having difficulty with their identity and what does it mean to be a good man. That's what I hope to flesh out. It's a complex matter. I'm also grappling with it as a father to girls, as a father to boys, as a husband, I serve on my local board, on all these different levels.
I have 3 boys. I think about what manhood will be for them, like at least every other day, in terms of how they show up, the level of aggression, their place in society, their leadership, or how they are going to be perceived by people. I stress about that often because as I am trying to figure out my own stuff about being a man in today's society, I'm aware that they are picking up whatever I'm putting their way, but I'm also aware that society is also trying to frame for them how they should be men. And there's this lack of clarity around that. Genuinely feel like there's been a common theme throughout most of the men I've been working with, which is they don't know how to be healthy men, if that makes sense.
I was going to chime in because having the control group of 2 girls, my wife and I had no questions about raising girls. They could play whatever sport they wanted with whoever they wanted. They weren't going to take any guff from men. They were going to do whatever they wanted in life. And our vision for how to raise girls was really clear. And it wasn't so with my boy. The issues of aggression. Do I want him to be aggressive? Do I want to roughhouse with him and have him be, do I want to teach him how to fight? Is that a bad thing? Always wondering about these lines with this boogeyman of not creating more toxic masculinity hanging in the shadows.
What do you now perceive as the main tenets of toxic masculinity that's being thrown around left and right? And now it almost feels like any display of traditional manliness is perceived as toxic masculinity. Where do you think you stand with that?
I think our definition of toxic masculinity is pretty well understood. It's misogyny, it's abusing or using women, it's not taking care of children, it's exploiting others, it's doing things that create a false sense of worth, the fast car, the fast women, the money, the chains, and all the other things, being aggressive, bullying others. I think what we were wrong is that we lost track of the definition of good masculinity. Like we threw out the baby with the bathwater, where, as you said before, a lot of things that are masculine or masculine friendly are often seen as toxic, like competitiveness. I have a friend whose son was very hyperactive, very aggressive. She recently got a call from the school that he was playing soccer too competitively. This is a 7-year-old. And I said to her, soccer is a competitive sport. Do you mean too aggressively? You're not allowed to punch in soccer, right? You can play soccer too aggressively, but you can't play soccer too aggressively. But the school said that he was too competitive in playing soccer. I think it's difficult.
I think that the overt toxic masculinity stuff can be picked up very easily. What I'm looking at in terms of toxic masculinity is that the beliefs system that prevents you from being able to be healthy, the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to be true to who you are, to meet expectations, even if the expectations can be perceived as positive. When you look at yourself as a protector or a caregiver, there's certain natural sense that may come to that, but you do that and forget that being vulnerable doesn't necessarily mean you're not still a protector. It just means that even protectors have moments of vulnerability and moments where they are not doing too well. To be able to recognize that is one of those traits of toxic masculinity that has been embedded in our definition, but it's rarely talked about as often because the big flashy things, misogyny and machismo, tend to be much more easily spotted.
It's more like that how. Like I gave you the list of what's, but you're right that how we are masculine, that rigidity has to do with how we execute being a man. If it's too rigid, if those roles are true, I always have to be strong. I can never cry. I can never be vulnerable. I shouldn't ask for help. It's a sign of weakness. The how we execute that identity can be very toxic.
And I also think that in the attempt to remove ourselves from the toxic masculinity component, there's a little bit of, and to your point, removing ourselves or moving away from that, but also not knowing what is the new definition of a healthy masculinity.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of trying things out without necessarily knowing exactly what to do. I was at a board meeting with an organization a few years ago when I was either the president or president-elect with the Latino Mental Health Association. We were doing our strategic plan meeting. I remember being in the room and holding back my participation because I did not want to seem as wanting to take over the conversation.
Yeah.
And we did some kind of like icebreaker that kind of touched into like sharing something about our experience. I was aware of that and I felt like I needed to share that because it was becoming detrimental to my contribution to the group. It was this desire to not show up as offensive or appear to be taking this sort of leader,
Mansplaining.
and then I was like, I'm not saying anything at all for half an hour because I'm worried that I'm going to go into that. In the meantime, I was denying what is really authentic about me, which is I have ideas and the desire to help. I'm there because I'm committed to being part of this larger goal.
So what's worse about it is that it's almost more misogynistic for you to feel like I have to hold back so that the women can contribute. You can be so aware of not being misogynistic that you actually become misogynist because
I'm going to give you space.
allow you to talk. Yeah, as opposed to leaning in.
I honestly felt like in that particular moment, and that's happened in other spaces where it's not necessarily, I'm going to come in at the end and save the day. There's an active desire for me to subdue the part of me that may feel like I'm entitled to an opinion about something just because I'm a man or like my perspective is somehow better. But then at the same time, I still have to own my leadership. I still have to own my voice. I still have to be who I am. Finding that balance can be challenging in today's society where you say something and it could be perceived as mansplaining.
There's a great book called Lean In, which I've given to many women I've mentored or supervised. It's almost like for men, you're leaning back, right? Which is not good for the tribe. To lean, one thing to interrupt and to trample on somebody, which is what maybe toxic men used to do. But we should all be leaning in. The goal is for everybody to lean in.
And I think that we probably have a little bit of work to do. We have a little work to do at figuring out what is actually the new definition we want to move into, and also how we get to that definition in a way that is genuine. I remember working with this one young man, and essentially what he was describing to me was a relationship that fell apart because he did not want to violate his partner's space. I'm talking about someone early 20s. He kept trying to be very sensitive to her needs, asking for permission to hold her hand and
Yeah.
permission to give you a hug. And she's, yo, we've been dating for 6 months. You don't have to. What is this? And he was like, I want to make sure that I'm respecting your boundaries. It became this preoccupation to show up as a sensitive, respectful man. He was coming across as someone who was not being genuine in his relationship with her. Ultimately, this is not working out, and she broke it off. He's talking to me. I'm so confused because I thought that she would want me
Yeah.
to really in tune to not crossing boundaries. She's telling me I already granted consent to our relationship. Just show
Well,
up.
that's
He couldn't do it. A lot of the work was about the messages he's been receiving,
mm.
about not wanting to be this toxic man that takes over a relationship.
I find myself in more and more sessions with men of all ages, man coaching, encouraging one guy to man up, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
And encouraging the other guy, like, listen, this is not 1950s. Like, you need to stand down. It's not what a good man does because they don't know.
What are some things that you're watching or seeing as themes in your sessions with men that are coming up?
I think issues of knowing what they have to contribute, especially it's even more pronounced among those who went away for deployment because they come back to their houses and their homes were running for better or worse without them.
Mm,
And now they're back. We know that traditional gender roles are very blurry because everybody works and everybody has to contribute to everything, their place. And so they err on either side. They err on being on the man of the house and it's my way or the highway, instilling fear rather than respect in the people in the house. Or they go the other route of being overly passive and I use the word marshmallows, where their partners are begging them to engage, to argue back. Tell me what you think. Give your opinion. Take the lead. And they don't, they want to be hands off. So I feel like it's almost a lot of man coaching when it comes to relationships in particular,
yeah.
a lot of man coaching.
Something similar to what you're describing is what I've seen in terms of conversations with men is like they're used to being in relationships where they're needed. Now, women are becoming more independent, not only the way they carry themselves, but also in the workforce and in their home. I was talking to a female client who said, the only reason I want a relationship with my husband is because I want a relationship with him. I don't need him. And she was very straightforward. I cover the bills. I'm able to care for the kids, have support for my family. I don't need to be in this relationship unless it's for him and I to actually make it work. And if that's not available, then I don't need anything else. And I think that men who have the perception that they are there for caregiver to become a caregiver, they don't know what their new identity is.
It can be really, and again, I do think men and women are largely different. We're largely alike, but there are general differences in your average man and your average woman. For men, two things I'll point out. One, I never hear men say, I don't need a woman. That's not a flex, but you hear that in the way women have risen and have gotten more power and they make more money. And there's a narrative of I don't need a man. I wanted my daughters not to need a man. I didn't want them to need a bad man. The goal of my daughters having a career is that not just for self-fulfillment, but so that you always have to have your money. And my wife always told me, a woman always has to have a little nest egg on the side in case she's got to go, right? But that's to run from a bad man. I think that a woman's life or a man's life is made infinitely better by a good man.
The idea of I don't need a man is a recurrent theme in many of the people that I work with. The thing about that particular statement is that it is a misinterpretation of something that needed to happen. In many relationships, there was a power difference between my dad and my mom. She needed to do her own thing in order for her to balance out the relationship in a way that was healthier. The idea of you shouldn't need a man doesn't mean devalue your partner. unfortunately, I feel like it's taken that sense of being misunderstood to, oh, I don't need you to the extent of you're not contributing anything to my life, which is a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Otherwise, wouldn't have this need to connect with people. We're talking about, obviously, in this example, we're talking about heterosexual relationship, but the same thing is true across all relationships. The greatest sense that we have in terms of human needs is the need to connect to other human beings. The moment that you say to someone else, I don't need you, you have to be cautious what you're trying to communicate. Because if I needed to do things on my own, I could. That doesn't mean I don't need you.
I might not need you to survive, but I need you to be happy, to feel fulfilled, to have a family. And I'll speak as a man. It's soul crushing to be told I'm not needed. Men like to be, men, part of our identity is to be useful to you, right? If the joke's on, I think it's one of the progressive insurance where it says, don't become your parents. It's men at Home Depot giving advice to a younger guy. When I help somebody with something, especially if it's a woman, but if I help anybody with something and they say, thank you, thanks for getting the door for me, I feel good. On a biological level, I feel good being used. If a friend of mine calls me up and says, hey, can you pick me up? My car broke down. I feel useful. And to be told by your partner that they don't need you, crushing. I said this to my daughters, you're really lowering the bar on the type of man that you're going to get if you don't need Manny. We're saying he could be a bump on the log. He can play video games all day and you have no expectations of him. We've just lowered the bar on men. I don't see how that benefits anybody.
The communication here, when talking about needing or not needing someone, a lot of us, and this is true for men and women, we build our identity based on our roles in what we provide and what we do. Have this identity in which you're supposed to be a helper, supporter, and you're shifting into maybe being a healthier supporter. But you're giving the message you're not needed. Unless you are able to detach from that altogether and move into a place of I'm okay with not being needed, period. Most people won't be in that space. Then you literally take a wound. Like you are wounded by the statement that is being said to you.
Yeah.
And then that leads to more problems within the dynamic, the relationship dynamics. And this is even in certain workspaces where, you're make a sacrifice and then you're giving a message of you're no longer needed.
Yeah.
And that crushes the man. Like
Crushing
they
them.
don't know what to do with themselves after that.
Yeah.
So this is not exclusive to just relationships on an intimate level, but I'm talking about all our dynamic.
I think in our society, on many levels, we are telling men that we don't need them. With globalization of industry and the loss of blue collar jobs where you work with your hands, we are telling men more and more, we don't need you. And I fear it's going to get worse because the first jobs going away with automation and AI are going to be the jobs predominantly done by men.
Huh.
I used to run a retirement group for Vietnam veterans. I had this group who came out of Vietnam and were really high functioning and had jobs. Like I had a little lawyer, a judge, I had 2 police chiefs. I had these really functioning guys.
Yeah.
And as soon as they retired, all that trauma caught up with them. They started drinking around 1 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. They were online looking at all sorts of things. Their identity was lost with their jobs. Unlike, I think women do a better job in retirement of engaging with grandkids, engaging with the church.
They've been practicing having social connections all their lives, where men practice isolation, even within their family system.
Yeah. Yeah. These guys, in terms of the issue of utility, as soon as they lost their utility, they were lost. They were sued.
For men, there is a definition of masculinity based on utility, where for women, it may be more based on connection and support system that they provide. So being able to be there for the people that they care for at an emotional level. And we men tend to do a pretty horrible job of that. It's taken me about 44 years to learn to connect with other men in a meaningful way.
My friend group, we hug each other, we say, I love you. And it's awkward, but we still say it.
It's funny you say that because I just got a text. I was communicating with Dr. Nunez, Joel Nunez.
Yeah. I love him, by the way.
He texted back and he was like, I love you. And I'm a very like touchy-feely kind of guy. And I still was like, yeah, man, I got love for you too.
It feels good though. When I hug another man, it feels good. It feels good. But it still feels awkward. And it might be the vulnerability. It might be, internalized homophobia. It could be a bunch of different things. We have the ability to be tender and we need to.
In terms of our identity and trying to redefine ourselves, we don't have the tools or the skills to be able to do the connection necessary to repair the trauma or blows we're taking. We cannot just substitute with another task or role. It really requires connection to heal from the impact of the loss we're having, even though it's a good change, like moving away from being toxic male figures. But that change means going through a shift away from what we've always been familiar with.
And there is a loss there, right?
Totally.
There's a loss there, just because there are some people who go through bariatric surgeries or whatever, their bodies are much improved, but they lose a part of their identity and it messes with them and
Oh,
they get
that's
depressed.
a really good example.
Yeah, just because it was bad doesn't mean it wasn't part of who you are.
What I find, even with myself, like I've been in my own therapy now for a couple of years. I was in therapy before that. The thing has come up for me a lot as a theme has been my relationship with my own father figures. And I say father figures because I had men in my life that were like fathers. And that was one kind of type of relationship. I had my actual father that raised me. And that was another kind of relationship. I had my biological father who I didn't grow up with, but I grew up in the shadows of this idea of who he was. I had a different kind of impact. And then I had a relationship with my Heavenly Father and what that was supposed to be, and the religious connotation that come with that. Like all of these different male identities in my life, and I still didn't know how to be the man that I wanted to be throughout most of my life. I didn't even know what that was supposed to be like. And so the recurrent theme is this idea of how do I get in touch with who I am in terms of my values and do so consistently and in a way that is intentional. And that's taken a lot of work. There's been some success, which I'm grateful for because I'm able to impart that to a lot of my clients. Always this part of you that's still working on something. You're always working on something, right?
Yeah. I feel that I've been married 26 years and I still think I'm figuring it out. Of course, she's also changed, but I'm still figuring out what it means to be a good husband, to be a good man in the house. I'm now parenting adult women who are 22 and my son is 18.
Uh,
And that looks very different. What does a good dad do when his daughter's going out on a date? What does a good dad do when she comes home late?
Show up with a bad.
That's always on the menu.
Just in case.
Depends what they text me. I think it's a lifelong process, but I think that's why these conversations are important because we could not have had this conversation, would not have felt safe 5 years ago.
Oh yeah. Even you were talking earlier, you was like, I'm gonna get canceled for this. There's still this hesitation of what am I
Yeah.
allowed to or not allowed to say? What am I able to admit to? How do I become vulnerable without the fear that this vulnerability may be used against me or that
Yeah.
someone will point it out and say, it doesn't seem like you really got it all together. And there's a certain judgment that comes with that. It is threatening. We are asking men to become vulnerable in spaces that are not safe with consequences that could be dire. Because we're talking about, oh, it's the healthy thing. I hear it's the healthy thing, but not all spaces are safe for you to come out and put yourself out there.
I'll even add that a lot of times we ask men to talk about their feelings, but I've done enough couple sessions that a lot of people want to know what a man is thinking until a man opens his mouth. And then it clears the room. Oftentimes, I've been in sessions where he doesn't talk. When he opens his mouth, the person is devastated, right? Or they cry, or they can't tolerate his complaints or issues. I've presented the issue of male suicide being as high as it is in jest, but very organically. I've gotten the response from many women that it's because men have a lower pain tolerance. Could it be that they have other pains that you don't know about? Yeah, they'll give birth for the most part, right? Does that mean being a man is easy? Because the top CEOs in the world are men. Does that mean for the common guy, it's easy? I went through that transformation with white privilege a couple of weeks ago. What hit home for me was that there is such a thing as white privilege. I said there's male privilege. But if you're the night manager at McDonald's and you happen to be white, it's very easy for you to say, where's all this privilege? If you lose your job, if you're subject to all the other societal ills, the opioid crisis and things like that, where's your white privilege? In the same way, how much male privilege is there if we're killing ourselves and drinking ourselves and drugging ourselves and tuning out and refusing to get engaged in relationships and mom's basement playing video games, we're losing a whole generation of men that are tuning out. They're not even trying to date.
There's a recent New York Times article that came out. The author was speaking about her experience dating and being a woman in her 50s going to restaurants. And there would just be tables of women sitting with other women and
Nope.
no man in sight. And she was like, they're not showing up. But then she described how even the men that she's been able to connect with, they're not showing up in their
Yeah.
relationship. We have to talk about that in more than just men are not showing up. We got to understand what's actually contributing for this dynamic to be taking place.
You may, I think it's on so many levels that men are not showing up. Even on a really rudimentary level, like the number of videos that I've seen online of a man either hitting a woman or some sort of crime going on, or some guy falls on the tracks in New York and the men just stand by. They don't get involved. I can remember my dad, with the many faults and toxic masculinity traits he had, rest in peace, that he told me that if somebody's bullying somebody else, you have to step in.
Wow.
If somebody's messing with your little brother, you better jump in. If a woman's being hurt, whether she's your girlfriend, or you like her or not, I remember he would tell you, if you're walking with women, it's your job to protect them. They walk on the inside, and if something goes down, you're only as fast as they are. Don't come home and say, you wouldn't believe what happened to Sarah down the block. Some guys jumped her and she wasn't fast enough to get away. And I even said to my son, if you're walking with a female friend, like, you're in charge of security. Saying that right now feels a little bit unsafe, to be honest with you.
As you're
Crazy.
describing it, I'm reacting to it and thinking, I'm sure there's someone out there in the audience right now listening to this conversation and saying, that's machismo, right? Like the idea that the man is supposed to protect, but there is a challenge to that, right? Like this idea of not being able to recognize the spaces in which men showing up means that they don't feel the need to hold back because their actions are going to be perceived negatively. They're well intended and they have a positive impact, which is going back to the idea of not participating because I'm afraid that I'm going to be perceived as trying to take control.
Unfortunately, it's good men that are going to keep their hands in their pocket and stay back. Because the knuckleheads will step in, right? If you're away at a bar, I always remember a friend of mine, she used to always get hit on by guys. She was very attractive, but she used to hang out with the guy group. And if we stepped away from her, she would have her hands like this. One day I was watching her and I realized that if you're a nice guy and you walk by a woman like this, you're like, she's not interested. You keep it moving. The only guy that's going to hit on you, you've just created a jerk filter. The only guy who's going to hit on you is the drunk guy or the guy who doesn't read.
Doesn't read the room.
And so what we've done is that the sensitive men, trying to be a good man, they don't know what to do. They're frozen. There were guys on that subway platform wanting to step in and were afraid. I don't think it's a better world when good men stand by and do nothing. I challenge anybody who says that's toxic in a heterosexual relationship. If there's a noise downstairs and the husband says, babe, check it out. Go check it out. Yell if you need me. Even if my wife was a cop, I better be right there with her. I better not be under the sheets when she gets back. I don't see how that's controversial.
Man culture is a really interesting topic. I would love to hear more about that. Because I have at least once a week conversations with men talking about not necessarily fear in terms of physical safety per se, like the fear of stepping in and sharing how they
Yeah.
feel or acting. Truth be told, I experienced that fear myself. So it's like, what is happening to us? Not that we should not be afraid, but that we are like being controlled by this perception of this threat that is in the ether. It doesn't allow us to show up in the way that we need to.
Message of we don't need you. And it's not just women giving this message. Society is giving men a message that we don't need you.
I'm paying attention to the time. I think we spoke for a little while. Like I said, this is probably going to be, not probably, we're planning for this to be more than one conversation and one that includes other people. You were listening to God and I speak and now talking to the audience. I hope that whoever's listening to us, that they feel that there's some value about what we discussed today, that they send any questions, any comments, disagree or disagree, please let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what comes your way. We'll be happy to communicate back.